Hello, my name is Erdem Topsakal. I'm the editor-in-chief of IEEE Antennas and Propagation Digital Communications. We are here today in Chicago, Illinois, with a true legend, Professor George Uslenghi. Professor Uslenghi, thank you so much for taking time and being here with us, sir.
Thank you very much, Erdem. It's a great pleasure for me to be here to talk to so many people.
Great. Well, I would like to start with the question about how did you get into Stanfield, pursuing a Ph.D. in physics, and then finally, what got you into electromagnetics and being a professor in the Accademia for so many years?
Well, I came from a very poor family. On both sides of my family, my father was working for the Italian government at the time. He had a job as such. He had just come back from World War II. My grandparents were basically farmers, so I was the first person to go to a university. And I had the ambition of lifting myself out of that shall we say, very lower middle-class status and do something better with my life. So the decision to choose science instead of law or literature was basically haphazard. It was my uncle, who was a little older, about 15 years older than I am, than I was at the time, told me that engineering was a good paying profession. And so I decided, well, let's go into engineering. So I was admitted to the Politecnico di Torino. I first graduated from a technical high school. And in those days, to get into a university, you had to have at least 5 years of Latin. So I spent the summer after my graduation to brushing up my Latin. And I managed to pass the exams in October, so I was admitted into the Politecnico di Turin, which is one of the two major technical universities in Italy, the other one being the Politecnico Milan. So I studied there. I graduated at a reasonably young age after 5 years at the Polytechnic with a Laurea degree, which was a doctorate in electromagnetic engineering, but really was electrotechnical engineering more than electromagnetics. And I started as an assistant professor there, but the pay was so low. I was making more money with a scholarship as a student than with an assistant professor, so I had decided to move into industry. When someone invited me, an ex-alumnus of the Polytechnic, to join him as a project engineer in Michigan, dealing with devices for the automotive industry. And I accepted. I came in April 1961 to the United States. I stayed in Michigan for several years, first at a small town, Fenton, Michigan, and then I moved after about a year to Ann Arbor, where I worked in industry for Conductron Corporation. And then I moved to the radiation laboratory of the University of Michigan, where I stayed for 7 years. During that period, I became very interested in physics, and so I pursued and obtained a Ph.D. master's and then a Ph.D. in physics. My real ambition was to devote my research to elementary particle physics. But in those days, when I graduated in '67, I was still involved in doing research at the radiation laboratory for the next couple of years. And by 1969, there was sort of a serious depression. There were no academic jobs available in physics, and the staff of the radiation laboratory was shrinking because we could no longer support ourselves on grant and contracts. So at that point, I decided to take a job, a university job in electrical engineering. I was accepted here at the University of Illinois, Chicago campus, and I started here in 1970, so I've been here for 53 years.
Great. So how do you compare those years? Because we are talking about years where computers were not accessible. So,
yes, there were no computers at the time. I graduated from the Politecnico di Torino, having the only computational tool was a slide rule, and we used the Briggs tables of logarithms for computations. So computers, when I got to the University of Michigan, finally, at the radiation laboratories, I think at the time, the biggest computer was the IBM 360. But I remember every time we needed some computations, there were a couple of specialized secretaries who would type the card, punch the card, then the card was loaded in a box, and I had someone pedaling on a bicycle to the computer center of the university with the hope that he wouldn't fall off the bike and lose all the cards or mess them up. So it was a job to get some computation done.
So how did you choose what kind of research you were going to pursue in the absence of all that? Because right now it's, for most of us, we have computers, very high capability things.
Well,
we have labs with multi-million-dollar worth of equipment and all that. So how do you even start thinking about, what kind of research one should pursue and,
We started the Conductor Corporation because in those days, those were immediately after Sputnik. And so there was a February transition in the United States to develop better radar systems, better defense systems. And so we had a lot of contracts with the Department of Defense and Conductor Corporation, and I had to brush off very quickly on the radar, so I started working in that field. And when I moved to the radiation laboratory, essentially, the field was the same. There were two large laboratories in the United States devoted at the time to scattering problems. And they were the radiation laboratory at the University of Michigan and the electroscience laboratory at Ohio State University, somewhat in friendly competition for contracts and grants. And so I started working with Tom Sr. at the time, and so I devoted my research mostly in those days, starting with some studies in scattering by coated bodies. And then I moved to dielectric lenses. I did several studies and publications on dielectric lenses. Around 1965, we received a request from the Air Force Cambridge Research Laboratories to write a book on electromagnetic scattering. And Tom Sr. and I were the two co-editors. I was working with him. That was an effort that took about 4 years. And toward the end of that effort, we enlisted John Bowman as the third editor of the book. So the book has many chapters with different authors. I ended up by writing about half of the book myself. It was a 4-year effort. It was published in 1969 by North Harlem Publishing Company, and it quickly went out of print. It was then reprinted by Hemisphere in 1987, and it is still today a major reference source for work in scattering theory. As you said, there was essentially very little computational work going on in those days. But I am proud to say that I wrote one of the first papers at the radiation laboratory on computational electromagnetics.
Wow.
Even so, it is not my field. And it was actual incidents on perfectly conducting bodies of revolution, obviously, or missiles, something like that, using Mauer's integral equation. And was able to, with assistance, to prepare a computer program that worked very well for the computation of surface currents on such a body. That was published in Alta Frequenza, an Italian journal that things went out of print several years later. Later on, with the next student of mine, another, by the way, president of the Antennas and Propagation Society, Roberto Graglia, we expanded in 1995 and published a work in the Transactions on oblique scattering by bodies of revolution with an impedance boundary condition, much more complicated.
I'm assuming mainly analytical work with geometrical theory of diffraction, PTO and PTD and all that, in these heavily mathematics, required. So how about the measurement facilities? Were you able to...
The measurement facility, when we needed measurements, were not done at the radiation laboratory. They were done at a subsidiary facility of the radiation laboratory at Willow Run, which was an airport near Detroit. We had anechoic chambers there. And some of the staff at the radiation laboratory, Eugene Knott, Valip, etc., were working on measurements. So at that time, I didn't do any experimental work until I came here to UIC.
I understand. It's very interesting. Well, my next question about you are basically one of the cornerstones of Antennas and Propagation Society. And, one of the things that you have done is to establish a new publication, which is Antennas and Wireless Propagation Letters. Can you tell us a little bit about the story of AWPL?
Yes. When I was elected president of the Antennas and Propagation Society in 2001, I have become convinced that it was time to go to online journals. IEEE had no online journals at the time. The Computer Society had a newsletter online. That was it. So I proposed to the administrative committee of AP-S that we set up an online journal. There was a lot of resistance. People were not happy with the idea because they felt it was premature. They felt that the Computer Society should take the lead in that. I pushed it through the ATCOM with some considerable resistance. In fact, there is a funny episode, I don't know many of the members of the ATCOM in 2001 still remember it, but one of the prominent members there, whose name shall not be mentioned, mooned me because he was so upset that we would set up such a journal that he mooned me. The journal went well, beyond my expectation. I had projected 250 printed pages printed at the end of the year because the ATCOM insisted we must have a printed copy. So the papers were put online, but then at the end they were collected in a volume. That went on for several years until recently it went completely online. There is no more printed copy of the letters. So I was editor-in-chief for 6 years. Then Gianluca Lazzi took over for another 6 years, and then Christophe Fumot, until just a few months ago, continued. And it has been a phenomenally successful publication.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, in 2009, we know that IEEE established the Uslenghi Letters Prize Award to your name. What do you think about this award then?
Well, it was a great honor. I was humbled by the award, and I try to go every summer on the podium to shake hands to the young winners, usually much younger than I am, who win this award for the best letter published in the previous year.
So just continuing on the APS, and you have been involved in APS activities for so many years. So how would you say it affected your own career, and what kind of advice are you going to give to a young generation of academics, their involvement in APS, and what are the things that, they need to do to follow your footsteps?
I think that the most important thing to do, whether you work in industry, in universities, in government, is to do something that you like. Because remember, you live only once, so you might as well enjoy life. The world is full of people who have jobs that they don't like, but they have to take them because, after all, they have to eat and support families. Well, I was very lucky. I spent my life doing things I like. And I would urge all young people to really select a job that you really enjoy, and your job becomes a game. And if you really enjoy what you are doing, you are going to be one of the best in the field. So that is my main recommendation. The other recommendation is, remember that life is not only your job. Never neglect family, especially small children, for the sake of writing a few more papers or completing another. One of the things that I remember most fondly is in 1977, I was then a single parent raising two small children. I took the summer off, and in a small van, I drove all the way from Chicago to Stanfield in California to present a paper at the Electromagnetic Theory Symposium. And we had a great time. And my children still remember the national parks and all the camping we did. We did something that you couldn't do these days, like sleeping in the van at night behind a gas station, and we were eating canned food because we had very little money to go on, but it was a fantastic experience. Of course, I wrote in the summer maybe 2 less papers, but who would have cared if I had not taken my children and put 2 more papers on my resume? What would have been the difference? Actually, none. So my recommendation to young people is take care of your spouses, your partners, especially your children, if you have children, your friends. Enjoy life.
Great advice, great advice. So we have now the technology is evolving. We have ChatGPT, we have other things coming up every year. There's a different thing. So where do you see antennas and propagation research is going? And then, can you tell us a little bit about your own ideas?
I started many years ago doing asymptotic work. Did a lot of papers on asymptotic methods. That is a thing of the past. Not that asymptotic methods are totally useless, but with the advent of computers, it is so easy to obtain results. What is still difficult to obtain is some physical interpretation of the results. It is a little sad sometimes for me to see, for example, in large journals such as Transactions, our Transactions on Antennas and Propagation, so many glossy papers with marvelous pictures, multicolor, and lots of numerical results, but little physical interpretation of what it means. It has become very easy, using canned computer codes, to produce a lot of results. So I decided that I would devote myself, because I always liked applied mathematics, to try to solve problems exactly. Problems that had not been solved before. Scattering problems. And I have had some relative success. Many years ago, in 1997, I published a paper in the Antennas and Propagation on isorefractive media, scattering by isorefractive bodies, and that led to a very large number of papers in this field. Then a few years later, about 7 years later, in 2004, I obtained the first exact scattering by a cavity, a semi-elliptical cavity with only the slot between the focal distances open. And that then led to, again, another series of papers, some of them authored with another excellent ex-students of mine, Professor Enricolo, Danilo Enricolo, and others such as Chalmers Butler, and a student who came as a postdoc from Iran, Nader Ashkanpour, who is now a professor at the University of Tehran. So I had fun, but the one that I liked the most is a paper that I wrote in a short paper in the Antennas and Wireless Propagation Letters on reflection by a concave parabolic cylinder, reflection by a parabolic mirror. That is a problem that had remained unsolved for over 100 years. It was first examined, to my knowledge, by Horace Lamb in 1906. Horace Lamb was a professor at the University of Adelaide in Australia, a distinguished mathematician. In fact, the main auditorium at the University of Adelaide is named after him, the Horace Lamb Auditorium. In 1906, he wrote, and it came out in 1907, a paper in the Proceedings of the London Mathematical Society, in which he considers scattering by a convex parabolic cylinders and solved that problem. And those were the days Sommerfeld had just come up with an exact solution for scattering by half plane. And so Lamb became very interested in this. And in that same paper, he pointed out that he tried to solve the problem for the concave side, but it was unable to do it. Well, I was able to do it. So about 106 years later, that was a great satisfaction to me. And then I tried to extend it to a paraboloid of revolution. I was able so far to do it for the acoustical case. And again, it was a difficult problem, and I published it in a work at the Academy of Sciences of Turin, which I remember. And now I'm still toying around with the vector case of exact scattering by a concave paraboloid of revolution, not a parabolic cylinder. I'm not there yet. I hope to do it before I die. And I am having fun. This was that.
Great. You had mentioned about the students, some of your great students. Students are a part of the academic life.
Oh, yes. Students were my best satisfaction. Well, yes. What can I have had so many exceptional students? I mean, going in chronological terms, the first student whom I had at the University of Michigan was Nicol Exopoulos. I was the advisor for his Ph.D. program in electrical engineering there, and he became a full professor at UCLA and then Dean of Engineering at Irvine, and he became a member of the National Academy of Engineering. So very illustrious students. You know, they say that if you are a good teacher, your students should be better than you are, and they certainly proved that point. I have had some other great students, again, chronological order, just about, and I've had some 22 PhD students that I advised and over 100 master students. Just some of them, I had, for example, Joe Kotolsky, who ended up being a research engineer at Sandia Laboratories. Then I had Roberto Graglia, who ended up as president of the Antennas and Propagation Society. He got his PhD with me here at UIC in 1983. And he won the Harrington Mitra Award for the society. And then I had, of course, Danilo Enricolo, who is here a professor at UIC, who got his PhD with me maybe in 1998, if I remember correctly. And he has been very distinguished. He's been an editor of the Antennas and Propagation Transactions for 6 years. So, and then I don't have any PhD students now. I'm retired now, but another few are, for example, Chiwo Tan, and his wife. They are both got their PhD with me, and are they now working for companies in Austin, Texas, and Marco Port, who did some really nice work with me. In fact, we published some work together on function theoretic method, Wienerhoff technique, in the last few years, and he is now an engineer here in Chicago working for Google. I tried to motivate him to follow an academic career because he's really very, very good, but he decided to go where the money was, so he went into it.
I'm sure you will agree with me that one of the difficult problems is to basically recruit some of the underrepresented minorities, specifically women,
Yes.
electrical engineering and PhD programs. So how do you?
That is a very.
What are the things that we need to do?
It's a very difficult problem. Well, talk about minority first, because women are not a minority, but minorities. See, IEEE is an international society. So what is minorities in one country is not minorities in another country. Black people are minorities in Western Europe and North America, but not in Nigeria or in Kenya. Asians are minority here in the United States, but certainly not in China or Japan or Korea. So when we talk about racial minorities, that depends very largely on which part of the world we are looking at. And the problems are different in different parts of the world. I'm more familiar with what is happening in the United States, where, frankly, there is still a lot of racism, and there is a lot of poverty. So minorities, racial minorities, are many times handicapped because they don't have, in many cases, sufficient nutrition at a very early age, a good education in school, support at home, and all that. This is a very, very difficult societal problem, and I think, especially here in Illinois, we have had some success in the past. There was a U.S. Senator, Paul Simon, many years ago, who introduced programs to start taking care, especially of minority children, starting from the age of 3 on. Because if you wait until high school, it's too late. So that is a very complex problem, and as I said, it's a problem that is different in different parts of the world. We're making very small progress. We need to do a lot more, but it's a problem that AP-S and in general IEEE cannot solve alone. This is a big societal problem. We can encourage the solution by providing scholarship resources, providing the financial resources especially. Women, different story. Women are roughly 50% of the worldwide population, but they, especially in STEM, they are still strongly underrepresented.
Yes.
And that is common all over the world. Probably still more in the United States than in Western Europe. Now, IEEE has done a reasonably admirable job in promoting women in engineering. And they are doing what they can. The Antennas and Propagation Society has been very active in this respect, in promoting women in engineering. We are still not doing enough. If you look at the presidents that AP-S has had, from what I recall, we have had 3 women presidents: Irene Peden, many years ago, Jennifer Bernard, and Magdalena Salazar-Palma. I don't think I'm missing anyone, but this is 3 out of my 60 years of experience with AP-S. That is 5%, and women are 50%. on the population. So there is a lot to be done there. Now, I have had more success now as president of URSI, of the International Union of Radio Science, which had really no women activity at all. I set up 2.5 years ago when I became president. I convinced the board to fund chapters of women in radio science. And there are now several, 5 or 6 chapters, and they are growing. And they are supported within the limit that we can afford financially, from the United States in particular, as a chapter. And in fact, in our AP-S summer meeting, we have joint activities of the women in Antennas and Propagation and the women who radio science. So I'm encouraged by these initiatives. We are moving in the right direction. We need to do more.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree with you. We can do more. We should do more. Finally, my last question, but not least, about work-life balance. So you had mentioned that you took the kids all the way to the trip. And so what do you do?
Well, right now,
other work and throughout the years as you were more, active teaching and all that. So how did you balance, life with work and right now, and any advice,
Well, I already told you what I'm thinking about during your life. If I have regrets, it's not to have had more fun. When I was young, especially with my children, with my family, sometimes spending too much time doing work. I don't think that's a good idea. So you had to strike a good balance there. Now, I am officially retired, but not quite. I continue, as I said, to be involved with URSI. I go to every summer symposium of the Antennas and Propagation Society, and I go to the Boulder meeting of the U.S. Committee URSI. And so I will be there again. I will see you again in Portland this summer, and I intend to go to the meeting in Florence, Italy. We have to become more international. When I was for a short time chair of the joint meetings committee of AP-S and URSI here in the United States, I promoted the concept that every third year, the Antennas and Propagation Society should have a meeting outside North America. And in fact, I pushed, now in 24 next year, we will have it in Florence, Italy. In 27, we'll have it in Kyoto, in Japan. And I don't know where it will go in 1930. But that is now doing well. And we had one in 21 in Singapore. Now, I almost forgot that one. That was in the middle of the pandemic. So it didn't go as well as it was to be hoped. But now the pandemic is over. So we start showing up at meeting instead of a Zoom meeting, showing up live. And I hope this trend will continue. Now, what I do now, I continue doing research for what I can. I do some little bit of gardening. I grow vegetables. My wife grows flowers. I'm very utilitarian. I like to eat what I put effort in, so I take care of vegetables. I still like to travel. And so I attend as many symposia as I can within my financial means, now that I don't have contracts or university support anymore. But I enjoy those very much, so I will continue attending the AP-S meetings. I attended all the meetings, I think, in the summer from 1967 onward. So it's been a very long career. And that's about it.
Thank you so much, George. We love seeing you at every conference, URSI, AP-S, all of the conferences. And thank you so much for your time.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much for asking me to give this interview.
Thank you all for all the advice. Thank you. Well, that concludes our interview with Professor Uslenghi. Thank you so much. Follow us on LinkedIn. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy. Thank you.